You've heard stories about World War II, about the bombs, the blood, and the battles that scorched entire nations. But no one ever told you about what haunted the skies above the Eastern Front. No, not the Luftwaffe, and certainly not the bullets or missiles. I'm talking about something else. Something that hunts from above when vengeance takes flight. I'm talking about the retribution from the sky. It moves through the night, unseen and unheard, whispering nothing more but death. No radars picked them up. No one ever saw them coming. At first, we thought they were angels, gliding silently over the flames. That winter on the Eastern Front, I learned that not everything coming with wings from the sky are from heaven. Months into the war, we finally breached the stronghold of an Axis-occupied city in the Mediterranean and regained control. We'd won the battle, but the war was far from over. Finally, the smell of gunpowder and grenades was starting to fade away from my nose. Since this is the last time I'd see a sunset over the mountains without worrying about an incoming bullet, I figured I was due for some rest. Maybe a few weeks off duty, a hot meal, and a cold beer. But the war, as it always does, had other plans. Word came in from the Allied command about 3 operatives and a scientist being held captive in an Axis-occupied village in Eastern Europe. They had infiltrated the enemy and gained access to critical information that could potentially turn the tide of the war, but they were compromised and captured before they could leave. I was pulled off the line so fast I barely had time to shake the Italian dirt out of my boots, and placed in a small group of Allied operatives tasked with a mission. And our objectives were direct: extract the prisoners and rendezvous to the pickup point. My heart sank into my stomach. The Eastern Front? It wasn't a war, it was a slaughterhouse. We'd heard stories, even in Italy, of the brutality, casualties, and the enemy fighting with a desperation we rarely saw in the West. Within 24 hours, we were aboard a battered transport plane. My team was small. Myself, a signals specialist named Dmitri, who spoke every Slavic tongue known to man. Thomas, the navigator. Quiet, intense, and a human compass who knew how to read maps even before the war started. And lastly, the weapons specialist, Sergei, a grizzled veteran whose eyes has seen the darker side of the war. 4 men to go save 3, somewhere between Poland and hell. Of course, the plan was crazy and insane. We flew north, then east, cutting across the top of Europe in freezing weather conditions. Thomas made it all the more worse after what he said while tapping the map.
We fly till the Germans don't expect us, then we jump.
Midnight at 2 a.m. The red light came on. I checked the toggle on my parachute. The rifle on my hands never felt this heavy, and the cold was something fierce. Nothing like what I felt back in Italy. This was a brutal, bone-deep cold that promised to kill you slowly if the enemy didn't do it first. The door cranked open, and the wind hit us as we stared at the earth below, which was nothing but a black, silent void. No lights, no cities, just endless, unbroken darkness. The kind of blackness only the Eastern Front seemed to possess.
Okay, boys, let's go!
As we hit the ground, I immediately buried my parachute beneath the snow. No mud here, just hard, unforgiving earth, covered in snow.
The drop was clean, with 6 clicks west of the river. The village is just over the mountains. 2 days on foot will make it there, maybe less if we push hard.
We are in hostile territory now and pushing deeper behind enemy lines. So, no vehicles, no radios. We have to do anything necessary not to draw any attention to ourselves. Certainly, we won't be having backups if this all goes to hell. And so, we embraced the cold, biting deep into us as we marched on relentlessly with the mission. I would love to tell you how long it took us to get to the mountain. Really, I would, but I lost count somewhere between the 4th and 6th day. But finally, we arrived. From up top, we could see it, but there is no way we'll be making it into the village through the patrols mounted around and within the streets. The intel we got couldn't be more wrong about the soldiers guarding this place. Hopefully, we can find a blind spot that will get us in unnoticed. Our best bet is to go around the mountain that wrapped the valley. It's not only going to be long, it is going to be risky as well. By midday, we were almost halfway round the mountains when we saw smoke ahead, dark and heavy, twisting up into the white sky. Axis soldiers were attacking a small settlement. The sound of gunfire echoed over the screams of the villagers as they burnt down the place. But then we heard something we didn't expect. A return fire. Not from the soldiers, but from civilians. A local resistance. As we hid and watched these go down, my crew and I constantly reminded ourselves that we are on a special mission under strict directives. We tried our best not to get involved, but once you see something like that, people fighting with old rifles and makeshift weapons, you can't just turn and walk away. We flanked from the east, cutting through the tree line and opened fire on a squad trying to push into the main square. It was chaos. The snow was red before it was over. But even with our help, they weren't getting the upper hand. The resistance were still being extremely overwhelmed. For every enemy that went down, 2 more came out of the smoke. It was a losing battle, and our supplies are starting to run low. Hopefully we have just about enough to carry through with the main mission.
Take your men and go now. This battle is lost. You cannot save this place.
He wasn't wrong. The enemies were closing in and our mission wasn't here. And so we started pulling back, covering as many villagers as we could. I told him to retreat with his men and make for the mountains, but he smiled at me, like he had already made peace with whatever was to come. I watched as he cocked his rifle and charged straight into battle to fight alongside his comrades. We left that village and carried on with the mission. Even with the distance, we still caught the fire behind us, glowing like dying stars against the snow. No one amongst us said a word for hours. By the time we made it to the village, it was already nightfall. You could tell they'd turned the place into a fortress. They were everywhere, and we had to act fast. Our target was the old factory turned into a prison at the edge of the town. That's where they were keeping the hostages. We entered from the back, through an old service door that gave way into the building. Inside, we split into 2 teams, one to stand guard at the entrance and keep watch, while the other breach. I and Sergei took the latter. We searched through the prison chamber by chamber and still couldn't find the people we were looking for. When we finally found Dr. Murashkin, the scientist, he was looking pale and shaken, but though his mind was sharp, he told us that about a week ago, the 2 operatives he was with were taken in for interrogation, and since then, they hadn't returned. It's apparent it didn't end well for them, and so we made our way out with just the scientist. Our exit was agonizingly slow. We needed to be silent, but the beaten and battered scientist who hadn't slept in days made every step a potential catastrophe. We managed to pull ourselves towards the same route we came in and could see freedom just 30 yards away. But then, the world went off. This wasn't a normal explosion. It was precise. A blast that tore through their ammo depot without affecting the prison we had just walked out of. This was well calculated. The explosion was followed instantly by another, which struck the main barracks block about 50 yards away. Bullets tore through the sky, raining heavily on the soldiers, tearing through them with such wrath that it seemed as if the heavens had opened fire. Something unseen was shooting down from above. Before I could finish processing what was happening, a shadow glided overhead, close enough that I saw the shape of wings and the wooden frame of a biplane. We weren't escaping a prison anymore. We are now scrambling through an inferno while racing against the vengeful shadows high above with an asset that we must return with alive. My eyes locked onto the line of trees ahead. They only offered the promise of cover, a momentary shield from the chaos. And the smoke? It was both a blessing and a curse. It blinded the scattered German guards, but also made it impossible for us to see more than 5 feet ahead. We dragged the scientist with us and kept low, slipping through the trees, smoke, and ruins until we made it out of the village. We kept running through the forest until the village was nothing but smoke on the horizon. When we were finally in the clear, we saw something in the sky coming our way. A streak of fire cutting across the clouds, falling fast, burning through the air like a dying star and crashing a few yards ahead of us with a violent hiss of flame against the snow. We approached carefully, weapons raised and hearts pounding. What we found wasn't a missile. It was a plane, a Polikarpov PO-2, something peculiar to the Soviets. The cockpit was half buried in snow. Inside, slumped over the controls, was a pilot, a young woman. She didn't survive the crash. You see, back in 1942, in the heat of the war, the Soviets had formed a regiment unlike any other, the 588th Night Bomber Regiment, an all-women team. Pilots, navigators, mechanics, every single one of them. They flew Polikarpov PO-2s, a fragile and noisy training biplanes whose maximum speed was slower than the stall speed of German fighter planes. They lacked many standard items their male counterparts enjoyed, such as radios or parachutes, due to the plane's limited weight capacity. But they turned that weakness into a weapon. They carried out their missions only at night, by cutting their noisy engines mid-air and gliding silently through the dark before attacking. They fought for survival, for vengeance, and they terrified the German front. Not because of their bombs. Those were small, barely enough to cripple a tank, but because of the courage they represented.